interesting. My grandma was grandma. My granddaddy was daddy. I still don't know if anybody, even when her sisters came, her 8 sisters come to stay with us for a while, call her Alberta. And so there's a certain respect there too, a reverence to the fact that you didn't call her by her first name. Sister Hart was what a lot of the people at church called her that were her contemporaries. They called each other sister, brother. I wrote a play about Grandma Speaks, and it was all about these little cameos at the table where I would come to the table and have a problem. And she'd always be there for me. She's always at the table. Even in my mind now, I see her at the table. She at the table, one thing she told me was about the need to be honest with people. And sometimes that might mean get to laughing, and while you're laughing, tell the people what you want them to know, and then just, to kind of lighten the mood.
For me, it's my uncle, late uncle. And ever since I was little, I had a really hard life growing up, but he was always there to guide me. And he would be so, the way he would explain things to me is as you're explaining to a kid. So all the adults in our lives that would do horrible things, he would name them as animals. Oh. So the grandmother was the mouse or something like that. And so he would get me to understand what's going on with them and why they're treating me the way that they're treating me and how I could overcome it. And so he would always tell me, one day when you grow up, you're just going to look back at this and you're just going to laugh.
I met Miss Ella Baker in the Civil Rights Movement. And one of the things she taught us was the people who hurt the most are the ones who tell us what to do, and which is to help them not hurt so much. So instead of sitting up in our classrooms and designing a program about what we would do, we would go out and find the people who hurt the most by racism, and then we would do what we could to alleviate their pain. And so these two women, in their own ways, taught me the same thing, and I have carried their lessons through life.
My scariest moment, and this is going to make all of y'all's hair rise when I tell y'all this. One day they was having a Klan rally right on the outskirts of our town. My brother-in-law, 2 of my cousins, and his niece, my brother-in-law took us over to the Klan rally. And it was visual from the road. We drive by, we're looking at it, and my brother-in-law keeps on going. When there's a way that you could come back into town, we thought he was going to circle back, but he turned around and he came back and he stopped. When he stopped, instantly there was a pistol at the side of my head. When I looked up, in front of the car was a shotgun in front of the car. I'm not saying a word. I'm not breathing.
I would say, Hyderi, that a time that I was afraid in my life was a different circumstance. So I actually grew up poor. From a financial perspective, our family didn't have much at all. My mom she worked for a job as the only person in the house that could work at the time. My dad was actually in and out of hospitals, both behavioral and medical hospitals, just about all my life. He died when I was 19. So my mom was really the breadwinner in the family. She was the one that helped support us. But when I say poor, I'm saying food stamps, that we were dependent on meals from the county food system. I remember standing in line with her when I was a young boy for a block of cheese and other dairy products that they would dispense so that we could, have food for the week. And my fear was that I was always going to be poor.
When they were doing the Black Lives Matter protests on Spruce Street right by the library, I happened to have been at the library, and I am in support of that, But at that time, I was just driving my car up and they were coming down, and I kind of was afraid. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I had my window down. I didn't want to just like put it up because then I thought the people would think I was against them, but I wasn't. And that, I wanted to bring that up to kind of hear what you had to say. I didn't know what to do.
Was you afraid because there was a lot of black people there, or was you afraid because you never been around that so much black people, or were you
And there
just afraid?
were, it wasn't just black people there, of course. There were white people in support.
In the parade too, and I didn't want to get anybody upset with me.
I haven't been like around a lot of black people neither. I've been around white people. I have been to a lot of places where I'm the only black. Me and my friends been to a lot of functions where the only black there. And I was like, where's all the black people at? You know, am I supposed to be here, or you know what I mean, or because I'm the only black here, you know what I mean?
I just had this profound feeling of separation. I have black friends, I love them, but it was all at school. And away from school, click, it ended. The town was segregated. I don't know what the fears, and I know that Toni Morrison said she thought racism was a division in the South, like it's a pathology. That she said psychiatry or psychology seems strangely uninterested in, and that was a long time ago. I think it's you probably know as a psychiatrist.
I think it's probably still a safe thing to say.
Yeah, that you know, like there's some division in the South. You know, what is it?
I've been at the utility company that I worked at for 5 years. I got my first supervisor's job. One of the older gentlemen was going to be retiring. That was his last meeting. And unbeknownst to him, we had taken up a collection to buy him a fishing pole because he loved fishing and he was going to be fishing in retirement. And at the end of the meeting, before we left, the manager presented the retiring employee with the fishing pole. And as soon as he presented him with the fishing pole, the retiring manager laughed and said, "I knew there was a nigger in the woodpile somewhere the way you guys were sneaking around here." So once again, I'm humiliated and I'm angry.
My mother-in-law, who was an absolute delight, I used to go to church with them because there's nothing to prevent a Muslim from going to church. I mean, we accept all religions. So I used to go to church with them, and the minister was railing on about Muslims and how such bad people we were. And I remember putting my head down and wishing to just fade into the background because I wasn't married and I did not know what my in-laws would think of this story. And my mother-in-law went to the minister and invited him to an evening. And she said to him, "I really want you to meet someone." And she introduced me to him in this evening. And she told me, "Please tell him how you felt and tell him your story." And I told this minister my story, and he was so kind and impacted by this. He apologized, and and I thought, this is my future mother-in-law, who's just the kindest, most wonderful person to try to teach, she didn't berate him or anything. She just tried to teach him that what he was preaching was not a good thing.
This actually is with my uncle, who's actually from Pakistan, so he's also Islamic. We just always were really close, especially after I graduated high school. the time that I really felt most kind of connected with him was when I did come out to my family, and I had not told him directly, but he had heard, just through my mom and aunt. Like, obviously we're all close enough that they, he found out within a few days, and he had texted me individually and told me that he had heard that I came out, and how, just that he was proud of me for being who I am, and that it never changed anything on the way that he sees me. So I think it's just kind of the way that we do have such different backgrounds, but we get along so well, and it's not at a level of just tolerating each other. It's like an actual genuine care.
With my friend Edmund, who I grew up with and was in high school with, and we were friends in high school. And then high school ends, we go our separate ways. We don't live in the same city. And then I don't know what to call it, the racial awakening over the last 10 years, 5 years, started happening. And the way that, so I had my own personal awakening or understanding expansion during those years too, and I reached back out to Edmund to reconnect and to see like how he was doing with all of this stuff. And I don't know, I just feel like it's such an incredibly precious like friendship that we have now that wasn't there before in the same way.
They are, I guess, our commonality with our mental health and just trying to take control of it. Because it's not a black and white issue, it's a human issue.
I kind of took from this how cool it is. We both had such different upbringings, and yet it sounds like we both have arrived at two very similar places. Like with Christianity especially, like it's just really interesting how we were raised in similar but differing, but we arrive in similar places again. And it's really encouraging to know that honestly that there are people like you out there who continue to exist authentically and continue to not let very oppressive systems like shut down who they are and like prevent you from living who you want to, as you want to live.
So I rarely am unaccepted. Now part of these, I think, before I knew what the term was, I code switch a lot.
You what?
I code switch a lot. Before I knew that was a term.
Yeah.
Basically grew up doing it, right? So I'm not even thinking about it. So to diffuse potential tensions, I do it. So I think the number of times I've been accepted is really the majority.
Either you are taught, actually. You're taught to love or to hate. And just like speaking to you and even just having this conversation, it's like, like you were just raised to, see people for people and to love on people despite, how they look or whatever. Because even just talking about what you just said, just listening, like, we are actually very much in common than we are.
Honestly, you got a tough one too. But the meaning's important.
Yeah.
And so you were born in Lansing.
Yeah.
So you've got kind of a similar story. So my mother did the same thing, probably for the same reason. So I was actually conceived in Japan, but when it was time for me to be born, she came home. So she wanted me to be an American citizen for the same thing, and for you opportunities to be an American.